Hello, good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 23rd of November 2014 and it's a bit cold outside at the moment. The old winter's kicking
Brass
in.
monkey weather.
Brass monkey weather. But I was just saying, we're going to be talking shortly about the chemtrails. I've seen a lack of chemtrails in the sky, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But before we do that, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Yes, communication channels, please, Mary.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
That's correct. 046 927 1212 is the magic number for the studio this evening and every evening. We also have the Facebook page as well on the anti-social media. We have the website oymradio.com. You can log into the chat if you like from there. Just pop onto the website. You will see the live chat button on the left hand side. You'll also see the Facebook link and the YouTube link as well. We're also on, for your listening pleasure, tuneinradio.com. Well, TuneIn, I think it's tunein.com actually. We have an app there as well, so you can listen to us on your Android and your smart device and your Apple devices and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Anyway, there you go. Alan.
Brilliant, Steve. Okay, now our guest on tonight, and I'm sure you all know who it is, Michael Tsarion's on. He's a author, lecturer, and a researcher. And Michael's going to be on. We're going to bring Michael on in a few minutes now. Normally, regular listeners to the show know we do Alan and Steve's week, which we're going to leave till the end of the show. But there is a couple of announcements that we have to make beforehand. But one of them, I just, out of curiosity, I want to just mention this. I just said earlier about the chemtrails. Now, over the last 2 weeks, I've seen very little chemtrails around the place. I just spoke to Steve before we went live when he came into the studio, and Steve said he's seen a couple, but not as many as we're used to seeing in the sky. Now, it's just curious as to what's going on. Now, I'm not saying it's because of this, but apparently Evergreen, who's the kind of CIA-fronted chemtrail contractor, went under. They went bust apparently, and I'm not saying because of that we're not seeing the chemtrails, but there just seems to be a lack of chemtrails, and I'm not complaining. I think it's a good thing. There's a lovely blue sky today and I didn't see any chemtrails today. But if you are seeing chemtrails where you are, let us know, just out of curiosity, or if you had seen a lack of them, because it's just interesting. I always get, I get suspicious if I don't see them rather than seeing them.
You do.
So I don't know. So if there's something going on, if chemtrails are still going where you're going, let us know. Just send us a quick email going, yeah, they're happening where we are.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any, as I mentioned to you, since about last weekend. I haven't noticed any this week at all. And I mean, like yourself, every time I pull the curtains in the morning or driving to work, I'm always kind of glancing up at the sky just to see if there is any activity. But yeah, definitely a lack of chemtrail activity this week, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely been quiet. So you're going to tell us about this Irish water?
I'm going to tell you
new information.
Yes, new information. Actually, I'm not sure if she's in the. No, she's not in the chat room at the moment. Not to say she's not listening, but my sister, who as you all are aware, has recently woke up and has joined the protest with the Irish water. She gave me some information there the other evening. She said that there was some EU directive that said that because Ireland was such a wet country that there was an exemption from us ever having to pay for water. So it just has it on the list here. It says Irish Times EU exemption rule for a charge on water. Cathy Sinnott was an MEP from 2004 to 2009 and a member of the EU Parliament's Environment, Public Health and Food Safety Committee. The government cannot be allowed to cancel the hard-won Irish exemption, since the government is not acting on our behalf, nor is it acting on behalf of the EU. Why and for whom is it trying to force us to pay for water? Now, Alan was just saying that he's heard the same information as I have, and again, thanks to my sister for putting me onto that. But seemingly, what Alan was telling me just as I arrived was that this exemption, it does exist. It is a legally binding thing. However, the Irish government are now backtracking and backpedaling once again. They're now saying that, yes, it kind of does exist. However, we already agreed to install the meters and charge for water before this EU exemption rule came into play. So again, more scare tactics and backpedaling and BS. So I mean, yeah, I think anyone who's kind of watching what's going on, you will kind of realise that we are starting to win. We are winning. We're definitely winning, and it's all by peaceful protest, peaceful non-compliance. And just because we are all standing united, despite the government throwing carrots at us. Last week we were all dissident Republicans, and we still stood together. We still stood proud. We still stood side by side. And this week now they're throwing carrots at us. They just want us to sign will you just sign the contracts, please? For God's sake, just put your name on it and send it back to us. So yeah, we're definitely making an impact, and I think, as Alan said as well, rats in a sinking ship. That's kind of the way it is now. Their back is definitely to the wall, so I think we are winning the war. And
I heard words of things like universal social charge and the broadcast licenses. Maybe they're having a look at that as well as a way to kind of appease the population. I don't know whether that's going to be true or not. It could be just hearsay, but we'll see what happens anyway. So next week, what's going to happen, Steve?
Oh, the usual. We're going to be here. No, actually,
you're going to be here.
Well, yeah, next week. It's going to be interesting next week because I'm going to be flying solo next week.
You are?
Yes, I am. Because anyone who has been listening knows that on Sunday, the 30th, which is next Sunday, international medium Mark Impey is going to be doing the platform work in the Old Castle Spiritual and Healing Centre in Old Castle, as I have mentioned. I hope you are all taking note. Tickets are €5, going to a good cause. They're going to a charity. Mark's a good friend here. He's going to actually be up in the studio next Friday, and we're going to be catching up and doing a bit of an interview with Mark. Again, he's a good friend of ours here, so he's going to be just, we're going to be laying down some tracks or some vinyl or whatever you want to put it, but we're going to have him on tape anyway. On tape.
That's showing your age now.
That is, reel to reel tape. Yeah. So we're gonna have Mark. He's gonna be doing his platform work on the Sunday evening again up in Old Castle. If you can make it, it's gonna be great. And he's also gonna be doing a live interview, a pre-recorded interview as well. We're gonna have that for you on next Sunday. So he is gonna be omnipresent in two places at the one time. So looking forward to that.
He does have a hectic schedule. He flies in on Friday and he's chock-a-block. He's fully booked up. But then again, he is a very popular, very good at what he does. So we can't complain there. Now, as I said, Alan and Steve's week we're going to do after we finish the interview with Michael, because we have a few things to go through with that, a few things to talk about. And obviously there's a lot of information that Michael wants to talk to us about and get out there. So I think we'll get cracking and get stuck in. Now, we're calling this interview the Dying Conspiracy, because there's an awful lot going on at the moment globally. And a lot of people are beginning to wake up and see what's going on, dictatorships and everything else. I don't know whether people are seeing the footage of Enda Kenny pulling up outside a company in Cork, but there was 200 protesters there, and they really give him a hard time. And he was surrounded by police and Gardaí. This is the man that says, I don't need protection. And you must have been about, 20 to 25 guards there with security. So the globally things are going on. So many people, so many countries are standing up and fighting and saying no more. And Michael is going to be talking to us about this. So we'll get Michael in. Good evening, Michael. How are you doing?
Hi guys.
Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
All right. Sorry.
That's okay. Thought we lost you there. Good evening.
Thanks for having me on.
Listen, thanks a lot for coming on. Much appreciated. It's been a couple of years now since you've been on. And
indeed, yeah.
And I know that we've been pestering you over emails and saying when you're going to come back on, and you've been very polite about it, and you just said that you're very busy and you're working, but you'll get around to it. And again, thanks a lot for coming back on and letting people know what you're doing and what's going on. And obviously, I just mentioned there, we call this interview the Dying Conspiracy because, as you said, it's the old world is changing. There's a paradigm shift going on, and we're going into some kind of new energy, a new shift. And it's the death of, as you say, the monolithic conspiracy. There's something going on. There's an energy change going on. But before we get into that, Michael, a lot of people know who you are. They've seen your work. They really like your work. We've had so many emails and messages on Facebook when they heard that you're coming on, saying they're going to tune in and listen to the show. But for people who are new to kind of the Awaken movement and they're waking up and they hadn't heard who Michael Tsarion is, can you give us a quick kind of bio of your background?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I've been doing this now for more years than I cared to mention, but went more public in about 2000. And it was just mentors of mine in California. I'm from Ireland originally, but spent a lot of years in America. And sort of accidentally, got into these alternative subjects back in 89, 90, and 91, 92. These were when I first came across this information. Of course, you remember at that time it was centered around another war, a Desert Storm, the Bush administration.
Yeah.
George Herbert Walker Bush and the whole Desert Storm thing. And I came across a lot of, conspiracy material that corroborated what I had learned, which wasn't very much in the 80s, but it was enough to get me started. And then getting more and more affiliated with different groups and picking up books and magazines and underground zines, just started to get really, really fascinated with all of this material. A lot of it, I had my family anyway had a background in the New Age movement stretching back to the 70s. Not that I was an active member, but we knew people. We knew a lot of organizations. My grandfather and mother were heavily involved in it. And so there was a certain amount of interest in that, although I subsequently, found that it wasn't right for me, the ideologies, but the conspiracy stuff was more interesting, especially because it was interested in looking at the sort of criminal history of mankind, and that's what we'll be talking about today. And slowly, my studies continued, but as I said, it wasn't until about 2000, which through then original websites, I have many, many websites on all different kinds of subjects, but the first websites were sort of put out around, I think it was 98, 99, 2000, then a lot of people liked my message, so surprising to me, because I had no intention of doing interviews or, becoming public. This was just a hobby. And I liked being in the background, and I liked sitting in the audience and listening to, other speakers and trying hard to digest their work, which I found, difficult. There's a lot of tentacles, as you know, to this subject. There's a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions. Some are pessimistic, some are optimistic, some are scientific, others are more spiritual. So it took an immense task, and then you have your favorites. For me, I had my favorites as well. You start relating and studying people that you think, just make it that much more clear. These are people like Lieutenant Colonel James Bo Greitz for me, and Eustace Mullins and G. Edward Griffin, and Myron Fagan, and then a lot of people even like the Reverend Jack Moore on the Christian side, and Tex Mars, and people like that, Nord Davis, a certain amount, and so many fine thinkers and writers on the Christian side, then moving more like Lyndon LaRouche's group, Dope Incorporated, so you have your favorites coming from Britain. See, like us, right? You and I, we're from Britain, so we know maybe a lot more about the old world history than a lot of the people who are into this subject do in America. They know the American side of it.
Yeah. But
for me, it was interesting because I knew European history, British history, and so when I start reading the Lyndon LaRouches and those people who had their eye on the European side of this, it made a lot of sense. Whereas to Americans, they wouldn't really know, is this really kosher? Is this really true? But I would be telling them, no, this is true. What you're reading here is really accurate. This is, I grew up in England and Ireland and Britain, I know this, what they're saying here is really accurate. So for me, you could not find this information in Britain, but you could find it, fairly easily, reasonably easily with the publishers and the conventions and the books and the magazines, and then later on with the internet, So I had amassed a lot of interest and had no intention of becoming, be on the public stage or anything like that, until other mentors who liked my particular slant. They liked the Irish stuff that I was bringing in, the ancient Celts and the pre-Celts. And so one thing led to another, and then they sort of kicked me out, into the deep end. And there I was, stuck having to do conferences and whatever. And that, from that point on, had more of a media persona. And from the 2000, I've been going on, it's now 2014, so there's about 14 years actively in the public eye doing this. Written many books, have several websites, and people are willing to check it all out, And as I always believe, it's an ongoing research. It's an ongoing research. No one person is an expert in it.
Yeah.
Each and every, it's a form of awakening, really, like you said in the introduction. Each person jumping in there to find out, like I did, and not to do it with any specific goal in mind, just for the love of it, to research these things and find out what's been going on this planet and see what we can do about it.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what it is. And as we've said before on the show, everybody is on a path of knowledge. Some people are further down the road. So, and it's just a case of taking your time. And as you said, there's certain areas that you have an interest in, and you went down that rabbit hole to go and investigate that information, find out what's going on. And the rabbit hole does go very deep in a lot of areas involved with the alternative media and what's going on with the actual cabal and the history, the whole history of it. Now, obviously, you feel that there's an awful lot of things going on now. We've had a number of guests coming on saying there's definitely a shift going on, a shift of energy, a new paradigm has taken place. Some people are positive about it, some guests were negative about it, and it's interesting to get their opinions on it. How do you feel things are going at the moment? Obviously, it's been a while since we've had you on, and you've probably come across loads more information since then. So, as you said, we call this kind of the dying conspiracy, and we're moving away from the old paradigm. What way do you think it's going to go? Where do you think it's going, and what do you think is happening?
Well, I do think that there is something going on in the upper echelons. I've been studying this, as I say, for years. And I do believe that the original age-old monolithic global conspiracy has been going through many, many changes. It's almost like a leg gives out here, an arm gives out there. The thing is becoming decrepit. And, I call it dying conspiracy as opposed to dead conspiracy, because let's be under no illusion, it's not dead yet. And it's even in its dying throes, right? This is like something where you cut off the head of a serpent. It doesn't immediately die. It's thrashing about in all directions and can cause even more damage in its death throes. So one has to look at it quite pessimistically in one level, because even though it is certainly dying, going through a major change, there can also be repercussions. This thing can do a lot of damage. It's thrashing around, and I'll explain more what I mean by that later on. As we go, point by point through what this death means and even why this kind of death is happening, right? But I would start out just by saying, let's first realize that some good progress has been made on the optimistic side for the world to even start realizing there is a conspiracy, or there has been one. So before we even talk about its sort of new epochal changes that are taking place, we've done since 9/11. Personally, I would date it from before that, but from 9/11 with take us all together, all the people who've had podcasts, written books, the whole from A to Z. That's quite a formidable force of people who have been inspired to do something about this and bring it to the public attention, right? So I think that's kind of worked. I think it's been, very, very good. Because I think a lot of people now can no longer, this is the man on the street, they're still, not as informed as we would be, but I would say that they have less teeth when it comes to debunking or scoffing at any kind of concept of a conspiracy. A lot of people might not want to openly look you in the eye and admit it, but they have to, because of the work that's been done since, September 11th, 2001. There's been a great deal of evidence put forth, and I don't think it's as easy as it was in the 80s for your average Joe, to turn around and go, oh, what are you talking about? Sure, you're a crank. They can't do that anymore with any real, with any real meaning. We would win. We would win the conversation.
Yeah.
So the good news is, that there's less people who can scoff, and I think there's a lot more people, and of course, this includes intelligent people as well, who now take it for granted that there has been some sort of conspiracy going on. They'll differ about how long it's been going, how global it is, how universal, blah, blah, blah. But, people know there's something going on. And you didn't have that in the 70s and the 80s. You certainly didn't have that, But crawling through the 90s slowly, now moving into the new millennium, I think a good many people realize, whether it's your pharmaceutical organizations or the psychiatric movement or the prison system or the economics of the world, they can see and, what's going on. Now, that's good. That's the stage one. That's what leads us to be optimistic. Now, on the other hand, I think that, I've been studying this so deeply for so many years that I've come to the belief, and it's just a belief, I mean, I may be completely wrong in this, but I do think that it's almost a situation in which, it's like Free Jack or something like that, where you go, or Blade Runner, you actually take the elevator to the top floor, to the steering committee, headquarters, and you find that the guy's blown his brains out. There he is, he's decomposing at his desk. And you're like the minion, you're like the sort of henchman, and you're thinking, hey boss, what the hell's going on, And so the hierarchy has died off. The steering committee people of the past, and we can think here in terms of even, the Vatican controllers, the College of Cardinals. You asked earlier about, how this plugs into the Irish connection. Well, my God, this country's been one of the first victims of the conspiracy since about, the 1400s, possibly even before. And that's what I meant by the monolithic age-old conspiracy, which was, whether people like to accept it or not, has been administrated by a group I call the Atonists. But those Atonists in our history books can be identified as more the College of Cardinals, which are not necessarily the same thing as the Vatican or Roman Catholicism. This is a cult. This is what's known as the Roman Circle or the Roman cult, a very different species of criminal than what knee-jerk Roman Catholics might think when you're talking about this group. They have to admit, Roman Catholics will admit that mafia came out of Roman Catholic countries and that the IRA came out of Roman Catholic countries and many other terrorist organizations. Yeah, well, they're just going to bite down on it and admit that these College of Cardinals are members of that circle, are extremely dark, evil people, and they run a massive global conspiracy, or they administrate for it. It's a many-headed beast. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
It's that particular organization that may be, now thrashing around. It's lost its head, and now we're moved into a different epoch. So it's like a rudder. You can imagine it like a big ocean liner that's got no rudder anymore. The captain is dead. What does it's like the captain of a pirate ship, for instance. If he dies off, he's kept a modicum of order, even though he is a pirate. But if he dies off, what do you think the rest of the crew are going to do? Their eyes all go to the treasure chests. Their eyes all go to the booty and the loot. And it won't be long before they're hacking at each other and grabbing all their worth, ladening themselves down. And so a certain amount of things that are happening in our modern world since the 70s, since the Reagan administration, there's different dates you can put on this, by the way.
Yeah.
Each person listening to this can say, well, when did the head get chopped off? I think one important date, not the only one. I myself can't conclude when this actually happened, but I think that the death of, you remember Pope Paul II, who reigned only for about 33 days and then he was found dead?
Oh, that's Pope Paul I, is it?
That's right. Remember
yeah,
that?
he was poisoned, wasn't he?
That's right. So I look at that date as being very special. I think that this thing we're talking about, that could be one of the possible dates, because there was so much criminality going on in Vatican City at that time with the Banco dell'Ambrosia and all these deaths and assassinations and money grabbing, and then finally culminating in the death of an actual pope. And the man who's responsible for his death, a famous cardinal, is walking around free as a bird within the precinct of the Vatican while this event took place. The death certificate was never released. We don't have time to go right now into all those details, but I would just look at that particular instance. Another one would say, well, the Reagan era, there's certain things about the Reagan administration that make me think that, that there was something going on. And then subsequently from that, he's an actor. The guy who follows that is nothing but a corporate criminal, the Bushes. These are numbskull people who only have nothing to do with the American people. They have no interest in that. They're self-serving. Next, you get some sort of profligate. You get some sort of, playboy in Clinton, a ludicrous selection for a prime minister, for a president. Then you get another nut and numbskull, in George W. Bush. And now you've got this creature that is just probably going to go down as the worst president in the history of the universe, let alone the planet. So, this all shows me that there's something very, very amiss, and that there's no real major control structure. There's a certain control structure, but as I said, it's the body of the serpent. It's different than actually having a brain anymore, And there's other things as well, like these money-grabbing fiascos, like the meltdown, in America, where, not just, the whole financial meltdown and the bailouts, that also shows me that something's wrong, because don't forget that in that middle of that mix, in the middle of that meltdown, a lot of very unusually powerful groups like Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch and others crashed. Now, how would that happen, you see? You've got to ask yourself a question. These are all tentacles of the major conspiracy. So how on earth do they collapse? That tells me that something higher than them is no longer overlooking the situation, and in this piratical snatch and grab, it is possible for then, these pieces on the board, the monopoly board, so to speak, to topple. So these are all indications. The rise of the internet could be another date that somebody might prefer, saying, look, mate, it's because of the rise of the internet and that everyone can have their own channels, and this information, is different than in the 80s when people couldn't, if they wrote a book on this or they tried to expose the conspiracy, they had no chance of doing it. But since the rise of the internet, you can access their work and you can have these wonderful, wonderful exposés taking place, and that has been a big threat. So there's a lot of different reasons why things have taken this shape.
I totally agree with you. It's actually just memory is coming back to me. John Paul I. There's a book out there called In God's Name, and the chap who wrote it actually has exposed an awful lot of things that went on regarding the Vatican in the 70s with McKinkis and Sedona and Calvi, God's banker, as they call him, and the chap who was found hung under Whitefriars Bridge in London with bricks in his pocket. So that's part of, the exposure game. And as you said, maybe we're on that. I kind of look at the kind of as if we're on a seesaw. And if in the 80s or even in the 90s you told people about certain things, they would look at you and say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. But now when you turn around and say something, it's like if you don't know about it, then they look at you kind of weird, say, you mean you don't know about this information? Everybody knows about this, And I think that kind of, we crossed over the central part of the seesaw, and now people are beginning to see things. Now, as I say, it's all got to do with a path of learning, and we're all in different paths. And what we say is exactly, keep an open mind, and if you do have an opinion, make sure it's backed up by some facts or information, because opinions by themselves aren't, you can't, there's no point listening to somebody's opinion if there's nothing to back it up. It's only an opinion. And I think that's very important, that, you need to do the research. And I know you have done so much research over the years. And I think we've had guests on the show here who have actually said the same thing that you've said. It's that the head of the snake has been really cut off. And they're struggling, and they're battling, and they're fighting. There's infighting going on, and they're fighting each other. And maybe they aren't all trying to grab the treasure now that the pirate captain is dead. And we've just seen so much going on. And there's also probably an element as well, I don't know whether you agree with this, that even the people on the top, if they're gone, the minions will have to be showing some kind of control to the outside world. Otherwise, it will just escalate to the speed of the collapse of the Cabal.
That's right. There's a tremendous danger of that. And I think that that's one of the reasons, if we go through a few reasons, what you just said there is very true, that it's not that this death was planned. You see, this is the whole point. The original masterminds were expecting that their descendants would be competent. You can't live forever, so no matter who you are, you need, just let us think of somebody like Cecil Rhodes or Lord Alfred Milner or, Lord Sykes or any of the endless amount of names that we could mention who played a role at the higher ranks. And then, as I mentioned, the names of the Affondi, these are the extremely wealthy College of Cardinals and people like them, and the orders to which they belong, Masonic orders to which they belong. These people expect that when they die, or as they age, they will have lieutenants who will take over. And like a lot of organizations do. But in reality, you see, this often doesn't work. You cannot count, and I mean you cannot count, the amount of profligate sons and daughters who have spendthriftly and flagrantly wasted the resources of their fathers. I'm not talking about in business now. I'm not talking about conspiracy. I'm just talking about regular business. Somebody who slaved to open companies back in the 20s or in a previous century even, and they build and they build and they build these empires, and then some ludicrous playboy son or daughter just goes and throws it all away, at the gambling tables, or spend just, yachting around the world and spending it frivolously. This has happened even in business, let alone on higher levels. So one of the reasons why there could be a major declination in the major conspiracy is simply because the steering committee level personnel die off, and their descendants prove relatively incompetent. This is the key, you see. And then they're all grabbing the chart, and they're all trying to grab the wheel of the ocean liner to say, I know where I'm going, get out of my way. It's like some Alice in Wonderland kitchen, or some trolls round a cauldron saying, give me the pepper, give me the salt, I know how much should be going into it, get out of my way. And in the end, the dish is a catastrophe. They haven't read the recipe book properly. They may even have lost sight of the North Star. To take our metaphor of the liner, they may have the charts, they may not be able to make sense of the charts because the vision that their forefathers had, they were obsessed with. These were a different caliber of psychopath. And the later psychopath he's equally psychopathic, make no mistake about it, that the descendants are no less evil than the original group. But the simple fact is, they may not have the same ideology. It may just be very vague to them. What are we doing all of this for? Do I really want to occupy these seats of power? I prefer just to playboy around. I prefer just to grab all this money and have these escapades. I don't seem to have the same mettle is the word I'm looking for. The mettle, mettle, of riding in the battle like these, stiff upper lip previous incarnation guys who were utterly dedicated in a way that the modern man, therefore their descendants, have no clue. So when you're dealing with Opus Dei, and you're dealing with the Propaganda Due, or you're dealing with, the Jesuit order and the Alpha Lodges of Freemasonry, this sort of Lord Kitchener, gung-ho, ride into battle, philosophy, this sort of crazy psychopathy, is really no longer found in the lily-livered, spendthrift, imbecilic descendants, that you have later on. And they're just not able to decipher the charts anymore. The guiding star has become occluded, and they just go round and round and round in circles. The conspiracy is technically still going, but it's going on autopilot, so to speak. And they just and another thing that can happen is because I've written about John Dee, and I've written about some of the heavy-hitting architects of control, pointing out to my readers just how serious this conspiracy is and how deadly it is. But the thing is, you see that these people had goals in mind, goals for the 20th century, goals for the 21st century and beyond. And in my Atlantis book, I name what those goals are. One of the most important ones is literally vacating this planet, with the use of the technology. But putting that aside, let's just generally accept that these people had definite goals. But see, as time passes, time has its own strange energy. And as you are tunnel visioned, when you're tunnel visioned on these agendas, you're also blinkered to what life itself is doing. You don't know what's going to happen in history. You don't know what time will do. You don't know what the thinking patterns of the next generation is going to be, let alone of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations down from where you've existed. So there's a lot of variables that these hierarchs, these evil arcs, simply cannot predict. And these variables can often work against them, against their agenda. Just like I say, you have a goal, you work to facilitate that goal, and for some damn reason, and this can happen to a snooker player, this can happen to a track runner, this can happen to a person who's trying to, invent the greatest sports car, and all sorts of weird variables come up that basically block you, And then another thing is, it ties with what I've just said, is that simply, even if you do reach some of the outcomes, they may not be satisfactory. Because when you plan something, you don't actually really know how the outcome's going to come out. So generations go by, right? Centuries go by, and then some of these things may have even been realized. I think some of the things that the conspiracy wanted have been realized, especially in terms of technology. But you see, centuries have gone by, and the outcomes that you may have predicted just don't quite come to pass as you'd hoped. And therefore now there has to be some sort of replay or some sort of reconfiguration of the plan. This also, I think, is important. But never forget that simply the process of history itself, the process of time, these people think they're in control of it. But of course that's laughable. Any fool I mean, it's almost a symptom of psychopathy to believe that you can have so much power that you can organize and control the flow of time. The actual existential fact is you can't. Even if you've got all the money in the world and you've got all these lieutenants, you still cannot rein. You cannot rein in time and make it go your way. You see, so there's that to bear in mind as well.
No, totally agree. And there is the other side of the coin, which I'd like to throw in here as a topic of discussion. Do you feel that maybe what's going on as well is part of their plan to show that they're weak and, you know, they're showing their kind of underbelly, but they're doing it on purpose to fool people into thinking that they are weak?
Yes, of course, this is key, and now that what you said will even be more important to them, because now that the head boy has blown his brains out or died of some hideous disease, and it's just the palpitations of this monster, you know, you kick it and it shudders, they can't believe it. You've got to realize that this change in the status quo has completely thrown a spanner into the higher echelon. These people are looking for a leader and they're not finding one. And they're noticing that it's like, you know, Al Capone has been, you know, taken out of the scene, and all the other lieutenants are just trigger-happy people. And that is why they had this debacle in the Vatican back at the death of Pope Paul I, which shows me a serious meltdown. That shows me a serious lack of control, where all these bankers and underbankers are just grabbing money for themselves and running amok and making all sorts of deals. And if you think about it, since that period, there has been sort of some weird, you know, it's all been a free-for-all, like these Bushes and private families like the Bushes, but even like Lyndon Johnson before them, you know, there's almost been a grab, and it's been putting these people that will be good people's champions, like Clinton, but they haven't a baldy, they haven't a clue about actual politics or anything else, and they have to have a bevy of these Brzezinski types to, you know, steer the ship of state. Even they don't do it that well. So the statesmanship is gone. And all you have now is a bunch of lower level incompetence running the ship. Then that percolates down into the local state level, right? Causing all sorts of chaos and all sorts of, that's why you cannot even count the amount of discrepancies and scandals in terms of mayors and city and state politicians, and the whole thing is just coming apart. Not to mention just other forms of incompetence that I'm sure listeners are completely familiar with, and things that they're seeing on a daily basis. Idiotic things. All of these idiotic things. Not to mention the financial meltdowns, these weird wars, the rising of the Islamic fundamentals, things that should have been handled, easily, are now running rampant, oozing out of the woodwork. And a lot of other financial meltdowns and what have you. All of this is symptomatic. You see, now as I say in the beginning, I could be wrong, but I feel that I'm right, that this tussle, this tug of war, and of course to hide that, they'll do what you're talking about, which is to distract. And that's easy. They've got experts who are really, really good at distracting you, into other headlines, other things that are happening, to disguise the fact. Now, the point that I was really hoping to make was that while the head has been cut off and it is dead, and the thrashing around can also be, negative in its own way, because now what might happen is we're in danger of having another conspiracy type thing take over. There's a situation in which the main one has died, but there could incarnate another sort of control, some other kind of draconian control. And also on a more deeper psychological note, and this is more like focusing on my particular work, and that is, even though the main prison warden is dead, and even though the prisoners can actually technically walk out of the prison, there's a psychological, compulsion in people to not want to be free. So I do agree on the optimistic side that we have, and I've already said that since 9/11 we've had so many thinkers and teachers and writers. This is unique to our history. So there's every chance that now there is this phase shift in the status quo, and people have a chance to be more free mentally and spiritually and even physically than they've ever had a chance in history before. But of course, the intelligent man knows that not everybody wants to sign off from the contract, because these things are two-way contracts. It's not just gun to the head. The hierarchy may be weaker, and the bonds that we had with them, the agreements we had, may be slightly moldy. The chains may be moldy enough for you to pull them off. But the other thing that we might see is that people don't want to pull them off. They just want to replace those chains of iron with chains of gold. And so now the responsibility falls deeply onto the individual, person, you, me, the listeners here now, to pick up the slack and say, yeah, something, I'm glad to know that there's been this kerfuffle on the top levels of the pyramid. It may not be as draconian, it may not be as strong as it was before, but it still falls to me to do something about that. And then finding out, how do I heal? How do I how do I purge from my system all that slavery that my forefathers have been in, and what can I do it with my consciousness to feel free, to get rid of these attributes, these symptoms of slavery? And I've always advocated in my work that means a deeply radical new relationship with what you have been called your negative emotions, like anger, like anxiety, violence, guilt, shame, hate. Because if you don't, then you remain enslaved in another way, and you'll still be running to those, those pharmaceutical drugs or the illicit drugs. You'll still be enslaving yourself through inebriation or anesthetization, and therefore there's a two-pronged approach. Yeah, we've made great headway in uncovering and exposing the monolithic conspiracy, but we still have a lot of homework to do on the positive side to get out of slave think. And to get out of hive think, the ubiquitous collectivism that is symptomatic of these leaders, and we are contaminated by it. So there's a lot of work still to be done on the spiritual side.
I think we could probably look at something like the Borg, where they assimilate, and we have to get away from that and think for ourselves, and not be tied into group mentality to a certain extent. We have to take back our sovereignty and our freedom, and I think that's what's happening now in Ireland. People are beginning to wake up and seeing what the government are doing is only benefiting the 1% and not the 99%, and that's what's happening at the moment, which is good to see. And one of the things he said there about the pretense that we're in slavery, and I remember seeing a photo on Facebook where you had this big horse tied to one of these plastic chairs that didn't weigh much at all, but his perception, the horse's perception, with this chair was probably a solid object that's secured, that he couldn't get away from. But if he actually realised what the chair was, in reality was a light piece of plastic that he could pull around the place. And so we need to look at, their perception of the way we see society, the way we see the system. And if it's not benefiting us, we have more power than what we realise. But we have to find out. We have to look into that and find out about, by knowledge, by learning and speaking to other people. And then applying that. And civil disobedience, that's really where we have to go. Peaceful civil disobedience. And if everybody did it, which is what's happening now, and the majority of people are, over here in Ireland, especially with the war, the protesting, then, maybe we have a chance of making that change, and never ever have this kind of government in place where they take advantage of the people.
That's right. There's, on history, it's a simple fact to prove it, that every time a mafia-like organization grew up, like the one that Prohibition, the classic famous one in the New York, Chicago, and a few guys, the Jenna brothers or Al Capone or any of these people, with a very small, relatively small force, were able to completely strong-arm and cow huge populations of immigrants, get them to do, what they wanted, like making the illegal alcohol and whatever. And not one lily-livered individual from these huge immigrant groups could simply get all of the people together, pick up a couple of hammers, and walk around the corner to the, headquarters of these gangsters and beat the living shit out of them and throw them into the Atlantic Ocean. But if a rival religious group on the other side of town starts slandering you and your group, oh my God, World War III. They could get up for that. And Ireland is, of course, the classic example of this. So, wait a minute. What's going on here? You can't raise, you're shivering in fear when a couple of gangsters come and push you about, and not a single record on history of history books of a group getting up and going and taking care of it without having to call on authorities. But if that same ethnic group, just like you have now with Jews and Arab, Islamics, or any of these other level, you see it all over the world, the moment that somebody, raises the finger to them, now it's World War III. That is the thing I'm talking about. So it's great knowledge, it's great news to know that there may be, a chink in the armor of the great dragon. But the thing is that still doesn't really make you free. You have to make yourself free. You've got to disengage, psychologically, and that's a spiritual process now. That's a very interesting process, and we're not really used to it. The masses aren't anyway. So it takes a long time for them to get with this gig. So even if the higher conspiracy is going through its death throes, the administration is still there, but it's a kind of an empty administration. And you can really, really see this. If you study what's happening in the East economically, if you see what's happening, if you really dig beneath the surface, you can tell that what I'm saying has a lot of credence. But it still doesn't mean that you're going to be psychically free. Now, one thing I missed earlier on, if I could just insert it now, and that is one of the other reasons why, one of the other symptoms of why this bestial, evilarchy could be dying off is simply that evil itself, I've said this at work, is itself unsustainable.
Yeah.
And therefore that regardless of the kind of, as I said, gung-ho, obsessive nature of these evilarchs, they're evil, they're mad, they're pathological. And so nature, which is in perfect order, does not support their agenda. And that means that any kind of evil outfit, especially the one of the global level we're talking about, it literally requires such incredible mental and physical resources, it's actually quite staggering. And this is why I say that once upon a time you may have had that kind of control, and you may have had those resources at your fingertips, like in, again, the pre-industrial age or whatever. But as time goes by, you simply don't. There's other little poxy conspiracies that crop up to rival you. There's all sorts of internal dynastic rivalries. There's death, in which the main ideologists, who are always few, die off, and then their descendants prove incompetent. We've seen this in business, we've seen this in local politics, and we certainly can see it in science, and we see it in all areas of life, and we certainly can imagine it happening on this higher level. And as I said, these higher forces don't like us. They don't even like our planet. I spoke about this in the Atlantis book. It's a big downer being insane, you see.
Yeah.
The inherent order of the universe, the inherent order of our planet, and the order of the human soul is actually obnoxious to these people. So they're the ones who really got their backs against the wall. Now they compensate for this by a different kind of order, a malignant order, a draconian order. So they're one of their symbols is the beehive. Another one of their symbols, as we all know, is the hierarchical pyramid. But never imagine for a moment that order that they're into is anything natural or organic. It's not. It's a very pathological, draconian order that they impose, and they impose it like a sort of exoskeleton of control, because inwardly these people are mush psychologically. They're in deep, deep psychosis and neurosis. And so the universe is not, and the human soul is not. It's in a state of order. And therefore, that order is obnoxious to these people. And that is another reason one can chart up on the board as to why the old monolithic thing is not working. So what we're doing now is we're in a very pliable time. Astrologically, don't want to bore people with all the astrological jargon, but Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn. This tells people who know about astrology backs up what I'm talking about. That amazing upheavals from deep down, can cause seismic reactions that disturb the establishment, the status quo. So there's certain cosmic things helping us, But again, it all matters that we need to tear up the contract as well. We need to also do our part to sign off from this, and then enter into a different relationship with fear. Like you said earlier, they keep us in fear. Yeah, but what is fear? And why do you have it? And, all of that. So there's a very interesting psychological component to this.
Yeah, well, I normally say to people that You know, if you fear something, the best way to stop fearing it is to learn about it, because education will get you away from the fear. But I'll tell you what we'll do. There are two subjects that we need to touch base on, which is the female Illuminati program, and also we'll touch base for a few minutes on Ireland and where Ireland fits into this global scheme of things. But what we'll do is we'll go over a few questions from Steve, and then we'll take a few questions, and then we'll get back on track with the female Illuminati program. Steve?
Yes, we've a lot of questions.
Okay.
As we knew there would be.
We'll do a few, and then we'll get back on track, okay?
Okay. We'll just kick off with one. Well, actually, there's quite a few in for Mr. T. Mr. T has been very active this evening. He first wanted to know, Michael, did you happen to catch David Icke at the Wembley? At Wembley, he said it was a brilliant show and an amazing atmosphere. Did you happen to catch that?
No, sorry, I did not.
Okay, can't ask you any questions about that though. Mr. T also wondering, can you ask Michael if he thinks now is the end of times?
Yeah, in a metaphorical way, history always will go on, for the good or for the bad. So I don't believe that, all this palaver came up, during the 2012 thing where people are screaming about ascension and all this other gibberish. There's ascension all right, but it's not a collective activity at all. Anyone who looks to ascension or anyone who looks to progress in mass groups still hasn't really awakened to what spirituality is all about. It's about ascension on a personalistic level, and the ending of time does have a meaning in that context, meaning that you transcend the limitations of karma, let's say, in that regard. But that's a very spiritual, internalized thing where you're working. It connects to what I just said about working with time, working with space, working with your life, working with your death, working with your so-called negative emotions. You see, because there's so many symptoms there's so many poisons in the blood. Our concept of what time is, our concept of what even the movement of history is, our goal orientation, our sense of competitiveness. So all of this has been insinuated into us because we're breathing the same air. We're poisoned, by the same filth. It's a drip down from the top of the pyramid, and we need to then cleanse ourselves. So yeah, it's an ending of time if we can make an epochal change from this contamination and say we now assert ourselves free of their mysteria, free of their religious bullshit, free of their political bullshit, and start to go through this period of cleansing. By all means, there's a tremendous consequence there, which could be, metaphorically described as the end of time. But when it comes to any sort of collective connotation, then absolutely no, I don't believe that.
Okay, if you were having a conversation, this just occurred to me, but if you were in a room having a conversation with our guest that we had on last week, which was Dr. Chip Alone from Australia, he said that he had a meeting with some beings, and what he was told was that it was the end of times. The planet was going to, I think Alan suggested this earlier, the planet was going to implode, and so many souls were going to ascend, and he was going to be the last one on the planet when all this took place. So he reckoned, I think he's 70 now, and he reckoned he might get another couple of years. He may not, but he was convinced of this and said that he had, a meeting with some beings who gave him this information. If you were in a room with him, how would the conversation go, do you think?
I would probably leave the room, because I've been for 35 years, as I said to you before at the beginning of the show, I've been affiliated with innumerable New Age personalities who believed similar or identical things, and nothing ever came to pass, So I have no personal interest in philosophies of that kind. They're interesting, I suppose, on one level to study. But I don't deal with abstractia like that at all. And this guy should realize that he's not the first to come out with theories of this kind. They've been very, very, ubiquitous, especially coming up to the countdown to 2012, and I try to bring some sanity back in my work, like Architects of Control. In that program, we went into a lot of these theories to show how bankrupt they were, so. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of different voices. I believe that they should have the right to publish and speak about what they're into. But me personally, I'm very, very hesitant. I've never endorsed channeling from the from my earliest days, and most of us were when I wasn't public. way back in the 80s, I was always telling colleagues and friends that I'm totally not interested in channelers. I'm very suspicious of them, almost all of them. And these were ones with even I thought there was actually some very strong work, good work that they were doing, but I never signed on for it, never endorsed it. So personally, I'm very against the whole concept of channeling, and that level of abstractia just never has appealed to me at all.
I think Dr. Cipollone, he would actually agree with you on that, because what he did mention to us last week was that there are certain levels of the psyche, and he was talking about when people are doing channeling. He said that even on that level, that you're still kind of within the realms of the whoever's running the show or whatever. I can't
negative
remember.
energies.
The negative energy. Yeah, he kind of still said that you were still, even though people are channeling, they think they're getting it from a higher power, but they're not. It's all from within the same system, if you like. And what he was suggesting was that, because we asked him as well, like, where do you get your information? How do you know your information is correct? And he said that he gets it again from a higher form of consciousness. So I mean, look, at the end of the day, I suppose he really believes in what he's saying. You'd be kind of skeptical of what he says, and I think that's good. But I mean, how do we know what direction to look? Because say you're on one side and you could be giving us some great information. He's on the other side giving great information. How do we know, like, who to believe?
Oh, it's very easy. If you've done your homework and you know anything about the roots of mysticism, I'll be doing that in my next program on I've been doing it in my Path of the Fool series. We'll be looking at it again in even greater depth when I do the next program, which is circled around the 6th card of the tarot, Major Arcana, the Lover, so people can check into that to get more, where I unpack your question more deeply. But a very simple rule of thumb to answer your question very succinctly is the concept higher. A channeler will always use this word multiple times in their conversations. The mystic never uses it. The word higher is a misnomer. There is nothing higher than the human being. So any concept of talking about gods, and see, this is one of the infections that I was speaking about earlier in a much more looser, general way. But now we can hone in on it. One of these pestilence, metaphysical, I call them mysteria, is a word that's just a catch-all phrase for this kind of illusions, delusions, ideas about ideas, all of this palaver, right, that steers us away from what we really are, from the roots of being. And one of them is this concept of higher. And it's an endemic word, it's an implicit word that is used by people who have the thinnest grasp on what mysticism, Gnosticism, metaphysics, and all is. In true mysticism, there is no higher. Now, we're dealing with such an infection that I know that a lot of people couldn't even grasp what I'm talking about, because it's so utterly embedded. It's so ubiquitous. Higher, God is higher. Jesus is higher. Muhammad is higher. Krishna is higher. Don't you get it? There's monks higher than me. There's a priest. There's a demagogue. There's a warlord. What are you talking about, Michael? It's a hierarchy, right? God's up there, I'm down here. It's simple. Heaven's up there. It's higher than you. It's higher than me. There's books that are higher than me. You get it? Well, no, I don't. The word higher is one of these mysteria words that immediately is used by these wolves, when they want to fool you, because they fooled themselves. They've auto-hypnotized themselves, which is nothing more than what channeling is. It's just a peculiar state of auto-hypnosis. A fascinating concept, by the way. We should get into it one day. But, because there's hypnosis where other people can hypnotize you, and then there's this other more interesting phenomenon which you can hypnotize yourself. And believe me, look around at the world and you'll get what I'm talking about. But then once you've gone through this process of auto-hypnotization, certain words, certain talismanic terms, and certain talismanic beliefs start creeping into your lexicon. And one of them is higher and lower, which has no validity whatsoever when you're dealing with the universe. The universe is a fractal. The universe is a hologram. The universe is many amazing things. But there's no higher and there's no lower, except in the warped brain of somebody who's trying to pose as a mystic, or pose as a Gnostic, or pose as a channeler, and is addicted to these terms. Now, one could go on endlessly. We should just leave it there, and I refer people to come to my Path of the Fool series, where we go a little bit more into depth. But there's your talismanic word of warning. So to answer your question, just analyze that word higher and why it's so prevalent, and how much impact that false word has. And how deeply, suspicious and suspect that word is. That's the word that is used by the physical hierarchies and the overlords who've caused so much disaster and evil on this planet. And it's also a word that creeps in these more elusively and clever and cunning mental tyrants who attempt to establish some sort of idealistic hierarchies within, hoping that we'll buy into it because we're so browbeaten by life and mediocre. Our lives are so mediocre that we'll buy in, unintentionally sometimes, to very, very prettily decorated, very cunningly contrived theosophies and Gnosticisms and even religions. It's all infected and contaminated by these things. And like I've been saying, we need to go through it like a forensic scientist, like a Sherlock Holmes, meticulously picking out these talismanic terms and the evidence of this mysteria, so that we can piece by piece purgate and come back slowly and painstakingly to what is real. To the common denominators, to the fundamentals. It takes time.
I think we'll have to climb the hill to come down the hill,
Yeah, you got it, mate.
I think that's the way we're going to go. Steve?
Are we all one, Michael? Mr. T wants to know.
No.
No, okay. That answers that. Okay. Where are we next? Anyone for T wants to know, can Michael comment on the Irishman Peter Sutherland, who is on the steering committee of the Bilderbergers? Is he Cabal?
Oh, I don't know the name personally, but I can say just in general that anyone in Irish politics today is probably corrupt, just in the same way that they are in Britain and America. No one today who's true could ever hope to get to the wheel. I wouldn't say it's completely hopeless, but in general, and especially then if you turn around and tell me things like, oh, he's a member of the Bilderbergers, you know how much it takes to even get into that organization. So there's no way that you would be even brought to that level.
Yeah.
If you were a good man serving the people, no way.
That's right. Sutherland and Coveney are part of the Bilderbergers, and as you know, Michael, that anybody, it's all about, they need to get some dirt on you, and if they have some dirt on you, they can control you, and if they can control you, then they'll actually raise you up to the hierarchy of the government, because they know you will do their bidding. Now, funny enough, I was watching people probably remember the old TV program called The Professionals, CI5.
By Brian Clemens, yeah.
That's right, Doyle and Bodie. And today, funny enough, there was nothing else on, so I watched that, and it was all got to do with in the UK government, a shadow minister being set up by a woman. It was videotaped what he got up to outside extramarital affairs, and the Russians, it happened to be the KGB, who showed him a photo and said, we have this evidence on you, and we want you to get this information from the government and give it to us. And basically, that's what it's all about. It's all about the blackmail and control. That's really what it is. And as you said, Michael, now I don't know about Enda Kenny. I don't know about any of the politicians that we have here in Ireland and whether that's the case. But there has to be something, because, when you hear what they come out with, and it's just brainwashing. I mean, I've said it before, time and time again, the survival of the party is higher than the people. What they can do with the people. They don't have the interest of the people. They never have. They don't care about the people. They never have cared about the people. It's all about the party and the survival of the party. And if they feel now, with Enda Kenny the way he is over here in Ireland, that he's destroyed, when he has destroyed politics, basically, they will kick him out for the survival of the party. But it's gone beyond that now over here in Ireland. It's gone beyond it. But I don't want to take up the time. I want to get back up to do a couple of questions, and then we'll crack on with the other two topics. Steve?
Sure.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Mr. T again is wondering, does Michael think it's the time, this is something you referred to earlier, but does Michael think it's time to get these scum? If so, how? And I'm guessing that's the people who are kind of doing the damage to this earth.
Oh, I think it's continually important to use the media and to use, I'm doing it myself, right? Now, anybody that I find that I can do something to remove, or at least to expose, and there's many, needs to be done. So that's the daily work of checking back, listening to what they say, and then once you've worked out that they're not for, they're not for what you want, then you have the right to go and try to expose them. But I would do that rationally. I would do that, sanely and methodically, not just by throwing muck or being a scoffer. That won't work. But I would certainly get into their face as much as possible to, call them out on what they believe, and if possible, move forward. It would be wonderful if, in America, for instance, people move forward, with more teeth and backed up those who want to take down Obama, and all of that. There are people who want to do it, but they don't get any support, So this is sad, Richard Dawkins has, wanted to get hold of the Pope's throat, and bring him to justice. Nobody backs that. So there is a lot of people who want to do the right thing and are quite capable of doing it, but then the public just sits there as usual, docile, flicking through the channels and, disinterested. So, and of course this is then, what's that statement that the reason why evil flourishes is that good men do nothing? Well, that's what the situation we're in.
Yeah. Well, we actually watched it. Well, I know I watched it today. I think Alan watched it as well. Just what you're saying there about people. You're giving them information and you're trying to wake them up, and all that they just want to just flick through the channels. And we actually watched a documentary. I think it was about 15 minutes long, and they talked about frequencies on it, and one of them was the Lily wave. It was invented by some guy. I think his surname was Lily, and they use it seemingly on TV. And seemingly, from what they say, when you start watching TV, within the first 2 minutes, it takes about 2 minutes to get you into the state where they can program your mind basically with this Lily wave. And they're saying like it's not a new age stuff. It's around for a long time now. And basically, once you succumb to it once, then the second time it only takes a matter of seconds just to get you back to where you need to be. So you're sitting down and you're watching TV, and you think you're enjoying a TV program, and you probably are. But they have the technology to basically tell you anything. Like you could be watching anything, I'm guessing, and they're programming your mind saying the government is good, don't question the government. The government has your best interest at heart. So you finish watching your program and you subconsciously believe this other mumbo jumbo that they fed you. And a lot of people, you try to convince them of that this technology actually exists today, and they look at you saying, you're a nut job.
Yeah, it's very difficult to convince people about that, and that's because they're so embedded in it.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. T, again, wonders, I think it's Mr. T off the A-team, ask Michael if he thinks World War III is imminent.
I do think that there's a possibility of a race war coming, yeah. I do. I don't think it's going to take on what that World War III term is usually thought about, but I do think that there's a possibility of a race war coming down in the future, yeah. Okay.
Where is Michael finding facts about the free airborne delivery of heavy metals? That's the question came in there a while back.
Oh, I don't know that much about it. I rely on other people. I'm not a specialist in those kinds of fields. I'm interested in it, but there's so many greater people than I, working on that particular aspect. So I couldn't really comment on that.
Okay. And is Michael aware that the Baring family of banking infamy, who were the personal bankers of Queen Elizabeth II, own and live on Lambay Island in Dublin Bay? Is there anything fishy going on here, does he think?
Oh, well, these families, including the Barings, have had a great deal of input into British, what we call British history, because remember, the family, the Windsors, is alien. They come to Britain by way of Germany and also by way of Holland. They've had rivalries with other contenders for the British crown, and ultimately, it depends what perspective you're looking at, but actually, from an aristocratic point of view, the British royal family is at very low level. Looking from the flag waver point of view, they're big honchos, they're big, they're bright, they stand on the balcony, they're one of these balcony wavers, and that's all to get the attention of the flag waver, on them, and to think that this is a true picture of what royalty is. Well, number one, it's malignant royalty, and their bloody empire throughout the world was nothing but malignant. There is a benign imperialism, and there is benign empire, but we've never had it. But when you go back to certain groups they had kings and queens, in ancient times, they were benign. They meant well for everybody, and there's nothing wrong inherently with monarchy. You see, it's only when you have these malignant pathological ones. But certainly when it comes to these individual families like the Rothschilds and others, and the Metternichs of Germany and the Barings, remember now, a lot of these families are all intermixed. So at one point back, maybe, at the Middle Ages or whatever, when these families started to appear on in the history books, there were one thing. But see, as time has progressed, these families have also weakened their blood, and they've become very, very mixed. This is Britain is one of the places where a lot of this happened for various reasons. So today when people are saying, oh, look at these American presidents, they're just going for the vote, so they let all these immigrants in because they're looking for the immigrant vote. But you think that's of the 21st century? That's what's been going on in politics since the 1600s, where all sorts of politicians, in order to land a vote or to secure votes, have been catering to so many lobbyists and so many foreign groups to undermine the culture and the racial culture and the religious culture and culture of nations. So this mixing has been going on, mixing the pot has been going on for donkey's years. And why I'm saying this is because I want people to understand one thing, and that is that the oligarchical families that we associate with the Netherlands, with Belgium, with Britain, and with Sweden, Scandinavia, are not indigenous to those countries. Those people could care less. So when you're talking about British royal family, Swedish royal family, Belgian royal family, I just go, stop! These people are universalists, globalists. They may have a house, they may have a name that is associated with a particular nation, but they could give a monkeys about that fate of that nation. And anyone can see by studying history that I'm right. So, one has to be very careful when you're dealing with these oligarchs. They owe allegiance to no one. They, just like the EU commissioners now, they have got their claws into all of the world, and they owe no national allegiance whatsoever. So even though I'm a great fan of some of these, nationalistic groups that are rising up, and parties that are trying to say, let's get back to some of the traditions, I disfavor them when they keep on, saluting the sort of British monarchy or whatever. They need to grow up and realize that British monarchy is not a proper benchmark or worthy of any kind of veneration whatsoever. You should try and pick something a little bit more, a little bit more sane than them, because these are people who have caused this meltdown. They've caused this dissension down through the years. They've sold out the cultures and the traditions. They're the ones who've allowed it. They're the ones who give the stamp of royal approval to all these Fabians and to all these Marxist groups, you see.
Exactly. There's no kind of borders with them. That's just, their greed covers no bound. It's a global thing. Anyway, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's move on and talk about the female Illuminati program that you've been working on, Michael.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's still underway and making some great progress. So the Canadian tour is coming up in March. People can go to Modern Knowledge Tour, Michael Tsarion, or come to my forum, or go to my Face Uni page. We post updates there. We've got video introductions there, and as I say, if you come over to my websites, you'll also be able to check out the progress of the Path of the Fool. But also we have femaleilluminati.com. There's also some very, very good, interesting information on that website before the program's even finished. But I'll be doing a talk. My next talk is a Canadian tour. We're talking about 6 or 7 different cities in which we'll be doing a 6-hour presentation, similar to what I did in Australia with posthumanism. And this is the first time ever that this particular door has been opened.
Well, I was just going to ask you, where does the female Illuminati fit into the global cabal?
Well, that's right. This is important because as I was studying for years these secret societies, one keeps coming across etymology, that's the study of words, and symbolism. So say you was an Irishman like I was, and you just started looking at the designs of cities, and then you say, where does this word city come from? And where does the word hall come from? Could it come from the Latin citus or cetus and phallus? Cetus, hall, right? Hall is in the middle of the word phallus, and cetus is the womb. All right, so then we go from there, and we move on to looking at flags, and we go on there to look at this and that and the other, right? And what about this stone of Tara? Why do all the kings sit on a mound? Why did Jesus do his Sermon on the Mount? Right? What's this? All thrones are sitting on a truncated pyramid. This kind of. So you go on, and as you're studying, I'm noting I'm noting that there's a lot of female, what can be described as female symbolism. Why is America's primary symbol the Statue of Liberty, which is a female? Why is it in a Vesica Pisces, which is a geometrical symbol representing the cosmic mother, right? Why is the birthdays of America aligned under constellational alignments that are purely dedicated to ancient goddesses and so on? I could talk for the next 10 hours on just the anecdotes. Astrological, symbolic, theosophic, you name it. Astrotheological particularly. Why is Europa called Europa? Europe.
Yeah.
Why is Ireland? Where does Ireland come from? That's a goddess name, and all of that. So what happens is, as you start studying these dark labyrinthine pathways and and studying these secret subjects, your eyes start to get acclimatized to the dark. And you find out that there's a lot of doors that haven't been kicked open yet. So to answer your question, looking at the female Illuminati thing is just to kick open another door to another vista. And I think the secrets, are amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm doing this patiently, and I'm doing it because it synthesizes a lot of stuff I've already touched on in my Atlantis book when we talked about, do you remember, because we've all talked about this before, the whole idea back in the original, to answer your question, what the hell does this have anything to do with our modern sort of architecture of power? Well, do you remember way back in the Atlantis book when I talked about the coming of the Nephilim, and then all these anecdotes from Genesis 6, and also the book of Enoch, in which the gods, or let's say the giants, the Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, the Anakim, they came on the daughters of men and took those daughters and apparently conceived by them, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very common, very, very famous, and extremely enigmatic passages. And it's not just in those two books. There's many other references within the apocryphal works that talk about this. There's many other traditions, actually, that have writings along the same lines, from Tierra del Fuego, the most outlandish places, also speak of these weird genetic, weird instances where, off-world beings anyway, and their relationship with the females. But the one thing that I noticed that was peculiar is that there's never any writings or anecdotes about the women, resisting this attack, is basically what it is. You also do not strangely hear about any anecdotes regarding the male population rising up against this band. You can imagine that they could easily do that, since they must have outnumbered these aliens, and yet you don't hear about that either.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to me very peculiar. And then the only conclusion, and I remember it is a theory, is purely theoretical, but from looking at the story, you might conclude that these women didn't resist for a reason. And if they didn't resist, and then they became confederates of this super technological off-world alien race. Now in the Atlantis book, I preferred at that point to focus on the positive females who, also being enslaved by this group, decided to not, who did resist and basically were extremely instrumental in waking man up. Right? The resistance of the women to these Atlantean warlocks actually was key in creating the whole Lemurian culture. The word Lemuria also pertains to the female, by the way, the great goddess. And so there certainly was, because my work on the female Illuminati, I must say, is not any kind of an indictment against womankind. We are here, and even the freedoms that we do have are related to the uprising of women against this tremendous evil archy, this technocracy, right? But now has come the time to focus on a group of women, the Sisterhood of Death, as I'm calling them, who did not resist and who actually went with the program, and they became immensely powerful. And it's the story of their existence running up to the modern day and how they have indeed influenced through their peculiar kind of ideology. So my work on the female Illuminati is just to try and explain for the first time what that ideology is. This will take us deeply into the realm of female psychology, which has always been an interest of mine. Maybe disinteresting to everybody else on the planet, but I'm sorry about that. We have to start opening some doors here. And we'll go into that, and then leading up to the modern day, to show how this particular aspect of the conspiracy has not been dealt with at all. And it's a big missing piece, and I think is crucially important to understand not only the way that the world conspiracy has manifested practically, in a physical, historical context, but to understand something also about the psychology of masculine and feminine, male and female. So it'll be a tremendous work, with many, many scintillating, revelations. I'm very looking much forward to, producing the program and also doing the talk in Canada and getting people's responses,
No, I think it's needed. I think it's something that needs to be talked about, the female side of the Illuminati and the Cabal, because they're instigators into certain things as well, and a hell of a lot of control as well, I'm sure, which we're not aware of. But I'm just watching the time, Michael, so there is a couple of things that we need to touch base on. The other thing I just wanted to quickly touch base on was the role of Ireland in the global scheme of things, because we know something that we've said before on the show was that the four races of people that the Cabal want to keep down were the Irish, the Scottish, the Native American Indians and the South Africans, because we are known as a rebellious race, the four of them, the four races. And, I mean, that's proof by our history. And Ireland, for some reason, seems to be very, very important in the scheme of things. Could you tell us what you are aware of and why would that would be?
Yeah, well, it's like I said in the opening chapter, probably even in the opening paragraphs of my books, The Irish Origins of Civilization, that Ireland has been the number one target of the old world monolithic conspiracy. But in Volume 2, in the very first paragraph of Volume 2, I went further than that and said that the kind of priesthood that Ireland gave rise to, and again, emphasizing the word Ireland, is the name of a goddess, but it's also the name it's the root of the word Aryan. So the true Aryan civilization, which just simply meant pure ones, was founded here in the West. And so every single motif, every single tradition of culture, worth its salt, originated in the West. You find derivatives of it in the East, and it's not to say that the East didn't have some of its own autochthonous cultures and traditions, but they're paltry compared to what arose in the West in prehistoric times, right? But to answer your question more succinctly, and that is that all those traditions taken together, and all the wisdom, and all the theosophy and theology that came out of the Druids, these servants of truth, right?
Yeah.
From their knowledge of herbs, healing, animal husbandry, animal symbolism, you name it, music, poetry, right? The greatest poetry is Bardic poetry. The greatest music is Irish music. On and on and on it goes. When I'm talking about complications and all of that. Now it's been discovered that even the measurements of the most ancient megalithic sites, it's pure and more precise the more and more you move towards the West until you finally get to Ireland, and then it's the megalithic yard and the megalithic mile is the most precise. So I don't know what it's going to take. This last 2 weeks, and I posted it on various sites, they found out that the Cretan civilization, called the Minoans, technically. The Minoan, they've just done the mitochondrial DNA research. Sure enough, it's Western. They hate this. They hate it. You can't imagine how the papers go flying when they find that one culture after another is actually being shown, just like King Tutankhamun, and all of it, slowly, bit by bit, inch by inch, the Western origins of civilization are coming, are being discovered. But to answer your question, all of those traditions, all of that spirituality, all of that rationality, it had to first be destroyed, right? Plagiarized and cannibalized for the kind of malignant conspiracy that we know today and that we've been laboring under for millennia to even arise. These are two different antithetical schools, and one could not live beside the other. So what we've got to understand about ancient times is that one entire school, one entire way of life, one entire set of traditions and worldview had to be utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed. And we know that as the destruction of the Druids, ergo, the first suppression of Ireland, of Irish culture. Which later you can see emanations of that in the Brehon laws and many other interesting Irish traditions. But they're already, moving far later into history, right?
Exactly.
But this original megalithic culture, Aryan, megalithic, whatever you want to call it, it's the same as the Nordic one. There's not an ounce of difference between what was going on in Norway and Sweden in ancient days, by the way. It's all Gothic, it's all Indo-European. This tradition, all of their traditions had to be suppressed. I mean, fundamentally, axiomatically, had to be destroyed in order for any of the other pathological stuff that, to be built. Because while the Druids lived, while their particular gnosis existed, there was no chance of any malignant thing lasting more than 5 bloody minutes. And so the answer to your question is that the whole Ireland is number one. It was the first zone of attack. Remember the whole rubbish about the earth being flat and they didn't want anybody to sail towards the west? What do you think that is? That's the Vatican and people like them literally preventing individuals from traveling to the west to come to Ireland, to come to the west to find out what was going on here. There was actually a prohibition, can you believe it, to even travel to the west. They made it look like the realm of goblins and ghouls and ghosts. That's all part of this propaganda. So Ireland is number one target. That's how ancient it is. And that particular kind of attack in its own way has been going on since Adrian IV, Henry II, up until the attacks of Cromwell. It just goes on and on and on right up to the present day. And it's still going on, maybe in a little bit more subtle way. Maybe the tyrant has a smile on his face at this point, but it's still tyranny. And, the Irish people need to wake up because they're what's deep in their genes doesn't exist anywhere else in the world as far as I'm concerned. That's what motivated me to write that book and to be one of the first Irishmen, if not the first, to bring out these conspiratorial aspects so that my mentors, the Commonwealth Beaumonts, the Conor McDarries, the Anna Wilkes, these kinds of people's work would never, be thrown to the winds and destroyed, And I did it as an Irishman, consciously Irish, consciously thinking about the country's past and deeply indebted to my mentors both in music, and this includes the great Luke Kelly, and the Andy Irvines and all of these characters that were instrumental in my awakening, specifically Jim Fitzpatrick and many others that I could mention. We don't all agree on these points, but nevertheless, I was consciously working as an Irishman to bring forth the work that I did on this subject, very consciously of that, because I do believe deeply that Ireland plays a deep role in prying loose, the prison gates for everyone else. It's part of the Irishman's history, and the more the merrier, I say, who get into this.
I think it probably explains why Ireland is heavily fluoridated. 98% of Europe are not fluoridated, and Ireland is, and there's obviously a reason for that. Now, but I do have a question here, and I know there's a couple of people who have the same kind of question in mind, so I'm just going to read it out as it is, and then you can answer the actual question, and it's just got to do with your background. And the question says that Michael, and this is just, I don't know whether this is this chap's opinion or whether it's facts. We'll get your opinion on it anyway. It says, Michael is a protege of the Freemason Russell Pine, in brackets Gordon Maxwell. Michael mixes some truth with lies, as with his mentor, is widely regarded to be an Illuminati shill. He has stated that he is sympathetic to Freemasons such as Aleister Crowley, Manly Palmer Hall and Helena Blavatsky. What's your take on that?
I'm not comment at all. This is just from the drivel, idiot, internet lice that are always trying to throw mud in your face, you know what I mean? And I have nothing to do with people who talk a lot of rubbish like that. Where are their books? Where are their DVDs? Where's their contribution to the human race that they should be telling me what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing? They don't know me personally, you know, and anyone who knows me personally knows that I loathe secret societies. I've been exposing them all my life, so, it's just drivel. And, the world is full of these people. If they can't throw stones, they'll throw dust. But, I'm impervious to that. I'm going to carry on. And I've been doing this. I've withstood attacks from all sides, for almost 20 years now, and it has done nothing to slow me down and never will.
It's part of the territory, isn't it? You're always going to get people who will question your motives. And I think you have to look at the work and the work that you do, like you would do and we do and everything else. And no matter, even though our moral conscience is to wake people up and do what we do, there's always going to be people who's going to try and pull you down. But
see, remember, in that work, in people like that, they don't really focus on your work at all. They focus on you. And I don't want to be liked. I don't care if a person likes me personally or not. I know that most people don't, so that's okay. I've went to school. I've lived on the streets. I know that, some people like you, some people don't. It's not something that's unique to just being on the public stage. But the thing is that what happens is these people cannot take on board anything that you've said. They do not read your work. They dislike you as a person. So you're dealing with two different things. But I'm not a person who cares to be liked. So their words are meaningless to me. I'm not trying to have you like me. I'm not trying to, I'm not wearing a halo. I'm not Russell Brand. I don't want to go around and be liked with a big stupid smile on my face from ear to ear. I'm a person who's deeply aware of the criminal history of mankind. I do my bit to try and expose it. That's all I care about. Nothing else. I'm pulling up the weeds of ignorance, the weeds of tyranny. And I don't care if my hands are torn to pieces in doing that, or I'm covered in mud. It is a work that is most serious and needs to be done, and I'm doing it. And what anybody else thinks about it, or they're looking over the hedge, is irrelevant. I have never even considered what people think of my work or think of me. But what I do notice is that good people who follow me and love my work, they're up to a certain standard, and they've realized that my work is a lot more concentrated, a lot more thought out, and a lot more psychologically based, within this movement. And they like it. And
exactly.
I only appeal to a very small group. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that my even work within this movement does not appeal to the vast, majority of the people who listen to these shows or who surf the internet. So it's again I'm dealing with only a very small, highly educated, highly knowledgeable group. So I don't really expect my words to fall on all ears.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's said to us about people in the alternative media. Do you have an agenda? And we do have an agenda. Our agenda is to wake up as many people as we can. And as what you're doing, and it's brilliant work you're doing, is the fact that we know for a fact that any society throughout history that has been exposed has never lasted. And if you're doing that and exposing what's going on, well then, pat on the back to yourself and the work that you do. Now, we have probably about 10, 15 minutes left. And we have one or two questions, and then we want to talk about the positive stuff as well, Michael. So I'm going to pass over to Steve. Steve has a question there he wants to ask you.
Yeah, Michael, I do have a hell of a lot more questions. Some that I know we're not going to get to, and I have posted them into the chat box there on Skype for your perusal. Maybe the next time you're on, we can go through them, or if I don't get to ask them, maybe if you could even throw a couple of lines of a reply. And just maybe send them back to us at your leisure. We can then read them out to the people. But there are just two, if I may. One I have to ask because it's from Marielle, and it's a good question. But as Alan just asked you the last question about someone questioning you, again I did get another one on the chat, and it was from Mr. X. I'm not going to go through the whole question, but he does kind of intimate that you are a Freemason, a Luciferian, an agent of disinformation, and an Illuminati shill. And I know I did say I would ask the question, so I know Alan kind of asked it, in one way or another. But what would you say to someone who says that to you?
Well, I would tell you need to edit these questions, because these are just ridiculous waste of my time to answer these questions. I'm not a Freemason. I don't belong to any secret societies, and it's just ridiculous that people waste their time. And the time this person should be reading my works. This person should be criticizing my works and not criticizing me, or wondering whether I belong to any such lodge. What does it matter to him if I even am a Freemason?
Well, listen, we will leave it there, because it is waste of time. And but we'll go over to the question that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, this one is from Marielle. Marielle, she follows your work, Michael. She was very excited when she heard you were going to be on this evening. And she wants to know, does Michael think that the Irish government are throwing words around like ISIS for a reason other than making protesters look like terrorists, to give the female deity a negative image in an age of feminine energy overcoming patriarchal systems?
Yeah, they are. But the thing is that the kind of feminism that has been proffered forth as an opposing force is not even real feminism. I've said in my work, and also we're doing a bit of this in the Path of the Fool series as well, that the whole way that masculinity and femininity has been presented to us is basically false. And also our ideas about it, from childhood, what constitutes male, what constitutes female, what constitutes masculine and feminine, is paltry. It's very, very weak. And remember we were talking earlier about some of the things that has to be deconstructed as we free ourselves. from the Matrix. One of them is looking again at what real femininity and masculinity is. Now, I recommend to her to go and watch my posthumanism program. It's free on YouTube. You know, Michael Tsarion, The Posthuman World. Or you can just go over to unslaved.com, where a lot of my videos are posted, and watch that and see, you know, get into that and read some other stuff that I recommend, because the kind of femininity that we are trying to align ourselves with, you know, is not real femininity at all. And the kind of malignant masculinity that we're trying to bring down, you know, we need to learn something more about that. So I think we're going in the right direction, but you know, there's still an education that is required.
Okay, and where do you see us going from a positive point of view? What's the outlook of the planet and the people? Where do you think we're going to go?
Well, you see, that, as I said, if the trend of continues that started, you know, in 2001, which is people showing a healthy interest in this subject, deeply appreciating the works that have already been written and done, the videos that are out there, watching them again, going back over it, you know, in life, sometimes we need to constantly be revisiting, just like detectives do. They revisit the evidence, they revisit it time and time again. So I think that it's very healthy for people to not imagine that they know it all and get really egotistical about things and spend too much of their time going around proselytizing when they themselves only have the thinnest grasp on what they're really, you know, talking about. So I feel that there should be a recapitulation where people go back over the works that they like and really, you know, make sure that they've nailed it, right? And then at that point, they should continue to create blogs. They should continue, you know, I mean, think back in the 70s and 80s. Nobody had the chance of having their own channel on the internet. I mean, your own bloody channel. Now, if you want to use that channel just to put up videos of your cat vomiting over your pet mouse, go ahead. And that's what we're getting. But, you know, that doesn't take away the greatness like you guys are doing, right, with your work. This is fantastic. It's actually pioneering. So continue that process. So I'm not so much looking at it, you know, an outcome. I don't do that in my own life, and I don't do it generally. I deal with the day-by-day work, and sometimes there's a flag, you know, sometimes it flags, sometimes there's periods where people go through a lull, and that's what's been kind of happening. A lot of false teachers were building us up to this big thing that was going to happen in 2012. A great deal of them were just talking out of their arses. So now after that anticlimax, a lot of them had to slink away and find something else to talk about, you know, and they haven't even been successful doing that. So, you know, there's a bit of a lull, and then there's a bit of disenchantment amongst the public, you know. So, but now there'll be a revisal. Now there'll be a sort of there'll be a return, a healthier, you know, more sane, logical return to a lot of this wonderful, wonderful material. And I hope that what I see for the near future is that people go back over the work of the greats, you know, people like whom I present, the Commons Beaumonts, you know, the Conor McDowell's, all the heroes and people that I present that have so inspired me. Really dig deep into their work, you know, the L.A. Waddells. Start discovering who are the great mentors, the great teachers who are there, but they've been shoved aside. You know, in science you have people like Tesla, Walter Russell, and so many others, you know. So let's go back again and pick up, you know, it's almost like the bad side of what's happened in the last 10 years is there's been a rush. There's been a mad rush through the circus, through the fairground.
Yeah.
And everybody snatching and grabbing popcorn, grabbing, you know, candy floss, grabbing, and all the lights and the going off and the fireworks. And that's good. That was the introduction. Now we need to go back in a more leisurely, stoical way and really start really learning. I don't think a lot of learning took place in the first wave of this. Right now the learning, the academic, really let it sink in. And then once that happens, then there will be another flowering later on that nobody can really predict, you know, in hard terms, but it'll be good. It'll be very, very good, you know. And I've done that in my own life, you see. I went through things quickly in the 90s, then I had to go back, you know, read it again, pick it up again. And a lot of books I even read today, by the way, are books that I've had in my library. There's one of them I've had since the 70s and never actually read it. You know, and so there's a lot of recapitulation that's needed. And it's healthy. It's a very good thing. So people need to feel good about watching the videos again, reading the books again, checking back to some of the great websites that they've loved or that educated them in the first place, and then going back and restudying that. And then from that will come a new lease of life and a new inspiration, because you have to have inspiration. You absolutely do. And so people should listen back to some of the early podcasts, you know, the ones that they like, and check out some of the old videos, you know, and come by. I got myself 14, 15 websites. You know, come back and look over those again, and, you know, look at the information again, and then you'll find a certain kind of inspiration, which is very necessary to take us to the next level. So that's what I would recommend.
Well, I think the path of knowledge, as you say, you do tend to come back and look at information that you might have read but didn't understand, and go down a few months or a couple of years down the road and go back and then re-look at that information. You then understand that, or have a different perception on it based on the knowledge that you have now rather than what you had then.
I've done that all my life. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and read over and over again certain works that were just so deep. In fact, people will notice this. If they go to my programs, they'll notice that I actually refer back to the same psychologists, the same thinkers, the same philosophers, many, many times, multiple times. And I do that actually, I'll even use the same quotes in many different programs. And that's done consciously for a reason. Some people don't like it, but I actually do it for a reason, because I'm trying to, I'm trying to get you to go and pick up those people's books, be it Wilhelm Reich or Alice Miller or Ignatius Donnelly, whoever it might be. I do that to bring those names, the Alvin Boyd Kuhns and the Gerald Masseys, and slowly they are. I've noticed that some people are picking up their works and are reading them and are starting to quote from them. And I like that. That was the whole intention, to bring back these great, great masters whose knowledge was far deeper than any modern scholars, could be. Great, great, great people. And I refer to them constantly. And so it's a matter of, we might have rushed over it in the beginning, and in our enthusiasm. That enthusiasm was very, very healthy and very necessary. But in doing that, we may have moved, crossed over some evidence, crossed over some vital pieces of the picture that we still need. And so there's no harm. Forensic scientists do it all the time. Detectives do it all the time. Go back over it, unpack it again, lay it out in front of you, reconfigure it in a different way, and go back over it, because there's pearls, great, great gems within all of that knowledge, that's been accumulated, say, in the last 14 years, since 2001. And there's nothing wrong with going over it again. And then, and this time leaving down your prejudices, years ago I didn't like to listen to Noam Chomsky, but now I'm wiser. I don't have to like the guy. I don't like that Michael Tsarion. I think he's a Freemason. He's got an agenda. Oh yeah, all right, big deal. But I actually never read one of his books. You know what I mean? So why don't we just drop the prejudices, go back, and if you're going to make a judgment about somebody, do it with some rational reason.
Yeah.
That's very needed.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, Michael, we've reached that time, and that flew by. Brilliant information. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 if we can kind of get you back on sometime, maybe in the new year. And because there's, again, so much information. There's so many people who are, who follow you and fans of your information and what you've done, and have a high regard and respect for you. And we're just trying to fit everything in the time that we have is very, very difficult. We've posted the questions over there in Skype. If whenever you have time to answer them, and just get back to us on that, that'd be fantastic. But again, thanks a lot for coming on. We know you're very busy, and much appreciated. I'm going to pass you off to Steve. Steve's going to get all your details and tell us about everything that you're doing, so people know where to get you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Michael, I do have one of your websites. You gave it out earlier, femaleilluminati.com. I do have that up there in the chat. But can you give us out some of your other websites where people can find out more about your work, or maybe even get one of your books?
People can go to michaeltsarion.com. That's a gateway to all the different websites that I have. And it also gets you to the Face Uni page. It gets you to my Facebook page. It gets you to the forum. Forum is where I post a lot of the latest. Remember we were talking about the anthropology and the Western origins of civilization. There's a couple of pages there, the Atlantis thread and recommended info. So there's a lot of current posts. And people, if they want to make their own posts, they're welcome to come to my Face Uni page, which is open to the public, and they can post comments and also add their own posts there. They're welcome to do that. And so michaeltsarion.com is the one to go to.
And you're on Facebook as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we have an MSAR Conspiratorium. MSAR Conspiratorium, so it's MTSAR Conspiratorium on Facebook. Yeah, MTSAR Conspiratorium, 2 words.
Brilliant. I think we're connected to that as well, which is, again, great information. Okay, Michael, stay with us there. We're just going to go off to a musical break, and we'll Steve will be able to tell people what the song is and who sent it over in a few minutes. But just stay with us there, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back. Yes. Okay, I don't know what that noise was, but we're back anyway. Yeah, that song was sent over to us during the week. It's from a group called Dots and Henny. D-O-T-S and Henny, H-E-N-N-Y. They just done what they could with the tools that they had, and they put a song together for the water protesters. That's what the song is about. It's about the Irish people that have kind of joined together and become as one, and that's their version of the song, We Won't Back Down. So, yeah, I did. They sent it over during the week. We told them that we would give it a little bit of play. And, yeah, again, I think if you look up, you will find it on YouTube. Again, it's Dots and Henny. So, yeah, it's worth checking out. There's a nice little video to go along with that as well.
Right, so how about your week? You have something that you want to play.
Again, my week was kind of taken over with the protest. As I said to you, I was up with my father's there during the week and was talking to my sister, and like she's at a place now where I was a couple of years ago. You know, that place where you just want to run around and tell everybody everything. And I think she's burning herself out. And I did tell her just kind of, you know, once she knows her stance and she knows, you know, what she's fighting for, just, you know, you don't have to read every post, you don't have to watch every video, you just have to know in your heart what your stance is and just you know, go with that. But there was a lot going on during the week, video-wise and protest-wise, in relation to the water protest again. But it was kind of all summed up. You mentioned to me the other day, and then my missus, she said it to me there this afternoon. She said, "Have you watched that video?" And I says, "No, what video are you talking about?" She said, "Oh, the one that Alan was talking about with Sinead O'Connor on the Late Late Show." If you're not in Ireland, the Late Late Show was kind of a long-running chat show. It's been going forever. It's part of the RTE agenda. But anyway, Sinead O'Connor, whether you like her or loathe her, it doesn't matter. She was on the show anyway, and they had agreed to do a kind of a swap, if you like, whereby she would take over the presenter's chair and he would sit in the guest chair, and instead of him asking her questions, she would ask him questions. So that's what they did, and before the show, you know, before it all kind of kicked off, they had agreed a certain set of questions. There was, you know, they had questions on the table which she was going to ask the presenter, Ryan Tubridy. But once she got over into his chair, she changed the game, and instead of asking the questions that she was supposed to ask, she asked different questions, to which he alluded to some of them. He gave politicians answers, but I think she was instrumental in getting the message out there. The message that we all know through alternative media, but it's not getting out through mainstream. She was able to do that. She educated not only the studio audience, which I believe is in around 200 people, but she educated everyone who was watching the show as well. So we have the audio, an audio clip from the show. It's about 6 minutes long. If you've heard it already, then go make a cup of tea. If you haven't, here it is. So this is Sinead O'Connor speaking with Ryan Tubridy on The Late Late Show.
Is it nearly over? Can I just ask first of all, this might be a stupid question, forgive me, honest singer. Is RTE state TV?
Not really, no, it's not at all. I mean, it's not, because it's not. It's run by independent people who wouldn't ever interfere in programming or anything like that. So no, it's an independent.
Right. And who are those people?
Well, that's be the Director General, the man who's in charge of the organisation, be like the CEO of a company, something like that.
Okay.
But I'm not great at the mechanics of the organisation, in the sense that I come in and ask questions and people clap and I go home. I mean, I wouldn't like to overstate my, you know, I'm not a representative.
That's what I'm going to try and get at. Oh yeah, no, just there was questions that I wasn't quite sure. So
sure.
Who and what during an interview is a matter of interest is in the earpiece?
Well,
there's nothing for me. I'm just wondering who often
what happens in the earpiece. There's a box full of people upstairs there, and
that's what they ask for.
Yeah, so what they do is like they're called this is really boring technical stuff, but this is what it is. There's a director and a producer and other colleagues, and they're kind of making sure the plane is up, you know, flying and land safely. So they might say to me, hurry up, or go home, or that was rubbish.
Okay.
But that's all it is. It's a little guide every so often.
Okay.
The gentleman over there, Kieran, will now tell you, wrap it up, or
and
stuff
do they
like that.
set the questions for the interviews?
No, myself and my colleagues what we do is we say, okay, Sinead O'Connor's coming on the show on Friday night, so on Monday or Tuesday we'll sit down and we'll go through where you are, and we'll look at we'll brief you up, as I say.
And what if it's a politician?
Oh, it's probably more intense because they've got to be asked hard questions about where they're at and what's going on and what's going on in the country. So we look into where they are. We research them to see where an interview can go.
And to what extent then are you, say, or Pat or Gabe, would have they been allowed to be involved in the question,
in the process,
the setting of questions?
I would say very, very involved. Yeah, in the setting of questions, but not necessarily the booking of guests.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's what I was wondering. To what extent? I've often heard you say, "Oh, they're asking me to ask such and such." I've always wondered to what extent are they given. So there doesn't be, obviously, given that it's not state TV, there doesn't as such be an agenda or a party line or anything like that.
No, not at all.
So yeah, speaking about the water thing, I just wanted to ask you today. I changed some of my questions that I had planned because of something that I saw here today. That somebody showed me some footage of a woman being thrown around the streets by the cops here, representatives of the state, and I was quite surprised. And I was wondering, as a person, now not as Ryan Tubridy, how do you feel about?
I can only be Ryan Tubridy.
Indeed. Well, no, but I don't mean as a representative of RTE, but just as a person. I exonerate him from any legal responsibility for anything he might say.
That'll work in the High Court.
No. My father's a barrister. My father's a barrister. How do you feel about the 1916 people being discredited lately by the state, and do you think it's because they don't want us being inspired by 1916 to revolt?
Okay, well, what I'd say to you is that I do have a role in this programme as what you call a moderator.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I have to kind of balance and even out debate. So when I'm sitting where you're sitting, I have to say, okay, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Sure.
Now, if I was sat here, even in this interview that we're doing, I didn't know anything you were going to ask me. I didn't know we were going to be talking about 1916 and water, but here we are, and I don't mind that, by the way, at all. That's what we're doing. We're just shooting the breeze. But if I start getting into personal thoughts about these things, suddenly I couldn't moderate a debate anymore. So I've got to leave that stuff for the pub, Sinead.
Okay, so we have a minute left.
Which I love going to. By the way, I'll have it out with you in the pub. I love the pub.
All right, so one final question. I've only got a minute. And this is my most important question. I've got a minute, and I want to add, I'm going to get Ryan to answer this, but it's something I'd really love the audience to think about and the viewers, okay? It's my belief that nothing born of the slightest violence can succeed spiritually, and that consequently it can't succeed financially or any other way. It's my belief that the First Republic of Ireland has failed because it was born of spiritual corruption and it's remained corrupt. To what extent would you all would you consider supporting the idea of an absolutely non-violent revolution in the form of peaceful civil disobedience and the creation of a second Republic of Ireland?
A brand new republic. Well, I think that conversation worth.
I mean, based on the fact that the cops are throwing women around the streets over the water charges.
Yeah,
it's time for revolution, right? Non-violent.
I think the emphasis should be on non-violence. So whether
you can't throw balloons, and
you can't rock a car with a woman or a man in it.
Absolutely not.
You can't throw a woman onto the street. I would say, and I said this to somebody on the radio this week because somebody gave out to me for what I was saying, and I said, look, the best people that you can look to in the world, iconic people like John Hume, Martin Luther King, they were marked and defined by their dignity.
Yeah.
And I think that the water charges thing has been stripped down a bit because of the dignity of the people.
But we mustn't be afraid of all the temptations not to revolt. There has to be absolutely non-violent, peaceful civil disobedience. Non-violent means don't throw balloons, don't throw anything at anyone. Sit in the street and get shot if you have to get shot. Silently sit there.
But non-violence is the key.
But we've got to claim back our country. The spirit of 1916, they built a country out of rubble. We have more than they had at that time, and we don't need to be violent or create rubble, but we need to get that spirit
represented. But didn't they need to use violence to...
And it's deliberate that our state are trying to discredit the 1916 people.
Okay. Well, I'll just say one thing.
No, but one second we can. The very fact is this discrediting of 1916 is being done on purpose so that we won't revolt. We must understand we can revolt without violence and study Gandhi. Everybody start watching Gandhi. So.
Are you happy enough?
All right.
How was that for you?
That was great. I'm very happy about it.
You're glad we did this?
I'm glad to see what goes on in the ear, I'm glad to... No, but I'm glad because I think it's important we start looking. I was shocked today to see at the Late Late Show of all places, the cops throwing girls around the streets. There's something very serious going on here, and something's got to change. I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about
Thank you for letting me come on your show.
Thank you for letting me.
It's been lovely.
Sinead O'Connor.
Sinead O'Connor, as I said, on the Late Late Show. Just on Sinead O'Connor's blog, she actually had a posting. The person in RTE who showed her the video footage of the woman being thrown against the bollards is asking Sinead to remove the information from her blog because she has it up there because they're afraid of losing their job. So Sinead had a snipe back at them and says, you know what, you should, instead of being afraid of losing your job, you should stand up for what you believe in do as I do and other people have done. Stand up for what you believe in, and don't be afraid, basically. But yeah, that was the audio snippet anyway. And yeah, well done, Sinead O'Connor. I wouldn't be a fan of hers, but at the end of the day, I listen to what she has to say. I'll take it or leave it, and that kind of resonated. So there you go. Anyway, what we know, only 3 minutes to go. How's your week?
Well, very quickly, there's an awful lot of people waking up, and I had a bit of kind of trying to educate the semi-awake. People begin to wake up and ask questions, which is great to see. But because they're new to the whole wake-up process, they're still kind of not understanding what's going on, the bigger picture of what's happening. So we just have to be gentle with these people and just feed them small bits of information and not go straight down the rabbit hole, because they won't be able to deal with it because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the information, they haven't researched it. So we just have to be careful with them. And the last thing that I just want to mention very quickly, I was asked to mention, is that, again, the magician's sleight of hand. While we're all protesting about the water meters and everything else, there is something that they're trying to bring in, which is TIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. It's a bilateral free trade agreement currently under secret negotiation by the EU, USA and powerful industry lobbies. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to Gaia, which is GAIA Foundation.org, GaiaFoundation.org. And they talk about why it's going to be bad for Ireland and all the other countries involved with it. So check it out. Very important. Sleight of hand. You know what they're like. Politicians, they're focusing so much on the water meters that we don't make sure that there's other things going on in the background. Brilliant interview, I have to say. Great to have Michael on. We had a chat with him there during the musical break, and we will do a part 2 when he's finished his tour in Canada. So it won't be until the new year. Won't be till probably May, June, something like that, around that time. But for now, for myself, take care of yourself. It's Alan James. Have a good week. Stay safe. Any information, let us know. And, catch you next week. We'll have Mark on next week. Take care.
Okay, and for myself, Stephen George, I'll say good night. Take it easy. Stay tuned if you're listening on the PIR stream. To Vin, his guest tonight is going to be Marco Rodin. So not too sure who Marco is, but it's going to be good anyway. It always is. So we catch you again next week. For myself, Stephen George, take care. Good night. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.